Welcome to Cycling Demystified, brought to you by Foundation Bike Fit and Frequency Cycle Works, the podcast where we help you take your cycling to the next level by sharing the knowledge from experienced bike fitters, mechanics, and the hidden players within the bike industry.
All right, team, welcome back to the podcast, and today we are going to be talking all about drop handlebars. Well, we might delve into the world of mountain bike bars and flat bars, or somewhere in between, but we're going to try and concentrate on drop bar handlebars, because I think it's actually going to be quite a big topic and something that is not maybe talked about that much. I think it's something that a topic which we feel has been overlooked, and there's actually so much to talk about in terms of the shape of a bar, its effect on your bike fit and your function, how it's installed, what materials we're going to be using, how you should look after your bar, cable routing, you know, all the huffing and puffing that we hear from Ev as he's trying to get cables through bars. So we wanted to give you some thoughts and ideas around handlebar shape and its application, adjustability, but also just some practical tips as well. So yeah, let's get into it.
I can't believe we haven't talked about this before.
I feel like we must have.
We must have touched on it.
In the early days of the podcast.
But yeah,
this is going to get messy.
it's going to get...
I reckon.
Any particular angle? Oh, I said the word.
Oh,
angle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Too much angle. That's sometimes.
Well, let's start off by just talking about the anatomy of a drop handlebar, and then I think we'll quickly see how complex this topic gets. So yeah, who wants to start us off? Matt, do you want to talk about different aspects of handlebars?
So I think from a fit perspective, the three most common things that we kind of look for are the width of the bar, and this is probably what most people think of when they think about adjusting or changing their handlebar, is the width of the thing. Mm-hmm. But then we have the reach of the bar, so that obviously has an effect on kind of, you know, how far your hoods are away from where the bar is clamped. So it's the distance effectively from the centre of the clamp of the stem to the centre of the clamp of the shifter hood, and that's basically the reach of the bar.
Yeah, so handlebars have a length measurement. So not only in kind of how wide they are, but like how long or far forward they reach forward, which is often overlooked and not really talked about.
Yeah.
People talk about how long their bikes are and so on, but not
their bars. Yeah. And then the drop of the bar also can vary wildly depending on what style of bar you go for. So the drop basically is how far you have to reach from the hood position down into the drop position, effectively. So the drop is the distance you have to go from the top of the bar to get down to the drops. So they're the three probably most common things that get talked about when we talk about drop handlebars, but there's a plethora of other stuff as well, which is slightly more nuanced, slightly more niche. People have very strong opinions about certain things. So we can talk about things like, flare.
Very trendy these days.
Very trendy these days.
Flare on the handlebars.
Annoys the crap out of me. Ergonomic tops and shapes to the actual top of the handlebar. You get bars with rise now, so big fan of a riser bar. And then other things like the actual kind of ergonomic of the drop. So there are certain brands out there that will do certain weird and wonderful shapes in the drop parts of the bar, all this kind of stuff. So there's a truck ton of stuff to think about when talking about handlebars and figuring out what kind of handlebar you might want to
just
experiment with.
That up. So reach, drop, width, ergo shape, flare, top, rise. That's at least 7 different distinct options that you have to choose when you're choosing your drop handlebar, and then combinations of all those within. So that's a lot of things to think about when it comes to handlebars. I'm not sure if people
and that's just the shape
realise.
of the thing.
Yeah,
we haven't even talked about things like materials, integration with shifter hoods, cable routing, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, so we get bars which are made out of carbon fibre, aluminium. Do we get steel bars these days?
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
You get titanium ones.
Titanium bars.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all of those have distinct characteristics, and not all of them are. We can't really make generalizations about those materials because depending on how they're made and their application, then they're going to be different. And then integrated cockpits as well, when the handlebar is integrated into the stem, so adjustability, cable routing, your favourite, Ev. So yeah, we're.
So I reckon before Ev and I start ranting and go off on one, why do we care about handlebars, Way? The voice of reason. Tell us why we care.
Well, certainly from a bike fit perspective, handlebars are very, very important. So your cockpit is a fundamental part of your bike fit and how you function on a bike and how it determines how your body carries itself on the bike itself. So all those things we just talked about, all those dimensions of a bar will affect your stability, your function, and how comfortable you are on the bike, all the way through to your breathing, as well as the handling of the bike. So how the bike steers, how easy it is to reach your brakes, how confident you feel in certain situations. So if you're riding off-road to on-road, then your cockpit has a lot to answer for. It has to do many, many different things. And people will prioritize different things based on what they're doing, including choosing their handlebar width based on whether or not they can fit a bar bag in between it, rather than.
I was going to say something else, but yeah, that's the thing as well.
What were you going to say?
Based on fads.
Fads?
Or
Anyway,
fashion.
Fashion. We'll get into that later.
Fashion.
Is there handlebar fashion?
Yes.
You poking the bear already?
Of course I am. All right, come on. Let's talk about handlebar fashion. What's the major trend at the moment?
There are two major trends.
Two major
There are
trends?
two major trends.
Go on then.
There's gravel,
Grav trend.
so wide flare,
Bar bags.
bike packing, or as we like to call it, touring. People want to fit.
Because we're old.
Yeah, people want to fit a tent on their hanging from their bars, or a really wide big bar bag, right? So the width, obviously, and also if you're doing adventure cycling, why don't they stop calling it gravel and just calling it adventure cycling? It makes more sense.
Cycling.
Or just cycling. Touring, I like touring. Having more real estate on the tops of your bars, right? So you're going to add lights, you're going to put maybe your quad lock with your phone, maybe some other kind of you might be a Deliveroo rider or something. Aero bars, clip-ons.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose in one sense, having a really wide gravel bar where
More
you can
room
put
for activities.
clip-ons for your aero position, even though you're riding... You're camping.
Aero
basically.
comfort.
Aero comfort.
But also you still got some real estate to hold on to the tops of the bar. All right, maybe, I don't know.
Options.
Whatever. You'd have thought that a drop bar would have enough options as it is. You wouldn't need to clip on extra options, but that's how it is.
So without being facetious for a second.
Can we do that?
Yeah. You can wear a hat. Wide gravel bars in certain circumstances can provide more stability when cycling over certain terrains.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be fair?
Yeah, I'd say handlebar width has a big effect on how your bike steers and handles. From a very basic point of view, if you have a narrow hand stance, so if you put your hands close together, imagine trying to do a press up. If you have your hands really close together, you're a more unstable surface. You're going to require more strength and control to kind of do that press up. So if you have your hands wider apart, then it becomes easier to do the press up because it's more stable. Your hands are more centered under your shoulders. It's a more natural kind of position, stronger position.
What if your hands are too wide apart?
But then, you can go to the extreme. So you can, if your hands are too wide apart, then that push up becomes even harder.
So why do mountain bikes have super wide bars for control and stability, but drop bars that are that wide. Well, I mean, there's no drop bar that's like 800 mil wide, is there? Not yet.
No.
I'm sure there will be.
Well, no, there is.
There is there?
No, like the warmer bar
600, I
comes
reckon.
pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But your hand position is different, isn't it?
Yeah, so
a
it's
mountain bike,
very,
your
it's very
elbows
much,
out and you're kind of
it's very much
using your
about
pecs.
the orientation of your wrists.
Yeah.
So mountain bike bars are particularly wide for that particular application because you need maximum amount of stability with a wide bar, but also you need a lot of steering control at slow speeds.
Yeah.
So if you're traveling at relatively slow speeds, but you also need to turn a tight corner with a wide bar with a lot of leverage, it becomes easier to control the front wheel of the bike. At the same time, if you're going downhill very quickly with a wide bar, you can make smaller adjustments to control the front end of the bike as you're going down. But it also has, it's because you have a different wrist orientation so that you...
It's like you're doing a pull-up or pulling a barbell.
Yeah,
right?
upwards towards you. Yeah, and so actually engaging a lot more of your...
Your
kind of,
lats,
your
pectorals and...
Yeah, so a lot of back muscle
shoulders.
goes into kind of controlling the mountain bike and so on. So that's different if you're looking at a road bike bar. If you look at the orientation of your wrist when you're sitting on a road bike position, it's actually perpendicular to how you would be orientating your wrist on a mountain bike bar. And obviously there are mountain bike bars with like differing angles as well, or sweep as they call it, to put your wrist in a different position. And actually this is a really overlooked part of bike fit, I think, and the effect of the rotation of your shoulders, the position of your wrists, and what effect that actually has on your stability, your overall stability and function. Because going from a mountain bike position to a road bike position is completely different. And there's one fundamental thing that we've been discussing quite a bit in the studio lately, between me and Matt anyway, because we're kind of biomechanical
Not
geeks.
you.
Not me.
But we've been talking about the importance of shoulder rotation and what effect that has. And this goes on to, we'll get on to your second fad, I think, because this is a little segue into that.
Yeah.
But just as a little aside in terms of biomechanics, do you want to talk about it, Matt? Like a little bit of...
Yes, it's all about internal and external rotation.
talking mainly of the shoulders.
Yeah. And how the shoulders can influence not only things like handling of the bike in terms of the bar width, but it can also have a massive effect on your pedaling and what your hips do. So as we know, hips don't lie. Shakira said so. So what we're seeing a lot of in the studio recently is the trend or fad for bars to be going narrower, 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 and hoods to be rotated even more extreme angles relative to the handlebar. And we're seeing this a lot, and sure, it's the kind of the done thing, and it's, you know, maybe more aero and whatever, but there are consequences to not only the handling of the bike, but also your function on the bike as well. So if you think about kind of your shoulders, you have both internal and external rotation of your shoulders. And the more internally rotated your shoulders become, i.e. the more you kind of hunch and crouch and compress your chest, this has a knock-on effect everywhere else in your body. So the more you go on, I can see you dying.
I think just to illustrate to people listening kind of what internal rotation is.
Oh, go on then, yeah.
If you hold your hand out in a handshake position, so your thumb is pointing out up towards the ceiling, and your palm is out in front of you. Internal rotation would be rotating your thumb inward towards the midline of your body.
Yeah.
And so your palm would end up facing down towards the floor. If you rotate your wrist, you'll notice that your elbow will follow and your shoulder will follow that inward rotation. That's what inward rotation is, or internal rotation, and external is the opposite way around. So if you rotated your thumbs away from the vertical neutral position, so outwards, so that your palms are eventually facing upwards towards the ceiling, then that would be external rotation. So just because we're on a podcast, just had to describe that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That
So
makes sense. So the more internally rotated you become, the less stable of a position your body is in. So if we think about just like handling for the first kind of like sake of argument, the narrower your bars become, the closer your hands are together, the more internally rotated your shoulders are, the bike is going to respond faster to smaller movements, which means that your skill level needs to be elevated to be able to deal with that increased responsiveness of the bike. But also you're in a less stable position due to that internal rotation of your shoulders. So your body has to have more capacity and be kind of stronger to create that stability that you're not getting from the torque that you're losing by being internally rotated. So that's kind of one thing. So handlebars, the width of the bar and how that has an influence on your shoulders can not only affect the handling of the bike, but also your stability on the bike. The second thing, and this is kind of the wildest adjustment that most people kind of go through in the studio, is that handlebar width can have a massive effect on your pedaling. And it blows people's minds when they experience this. But essentially, what happens is if your shoulders are, and for the sake of argument, I'm going to go narrow again, if your shoulders are too far internally rotated, your hips will tend to follow. So shoulders have direct influence on the hips. Now, if you don't have that ability to deal with that internal rotation of your femur in the hip, then this is going to cause more compression at the top of the pedal stroke, a less stable platform, and a greater reliance on muscles in the anterior chain, i.e. your quads, your calves, to not only produce force on the bike, but also provide stability as well. So essentially, you're not only compromising your handling by going too narrow on the bars, you're compromising your stability and your ability to produce force on the pedals. Does that make sense?
yeah, it's a tricky one to.
It's hard to describe without you seeing it.
Yeah, I think the best way we can explain it is that every little change within your body has a knock-on effect everywhere else. The key concept actually.
You're saying it's all connected?
Yeah, my head is connected to my toes, Ev.
Head,
Wild.
shoulders, knees and toes.
Oh, yeah.
Wild.
Knees and toes.
Is that what that song was
Yeah.
about? Okay.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Yeah, I lift my big toe and something happens in my hair. Well, we'll see. But just going back to internal rotation, this is a concept that is pretty common within the strength and conditioning world, but is probably not that well known within like kind of cycling circles and so on. But basically almost every joint in your body, if we describe our joints in our body, particularly the rotary joints, so the ball and socket joints, so our wrists, our shoulders, our hips, our ankles, all have the ability to rotate internally and externally. And if we want to create a position of stability, we want to rotate everything externally. So if you think about doing a squat, you kind of come down into your squat. You never want to roll your knees in. You don't want to roll your ankles in. You don't want to roll your shoulders in. A stable position is always coached, where you roll your hips outwards or your knees outwards in order to encourage the external and more stable, stronger kind of position. The same goes with like shoulders, wrists, and so on. And if we externally rotate our joints, everything in between those joints also has to be affected. So our spine is bounded between our hips and our shoulders. So anything that happens at either end also has an effect on spine. And I think this is generally what we see kind of in a bike position where we're generally quite hunched over. And so in very general terms, if we see more internal rotation, we'll see more rounding or hunching of the spine. If we see more external rotation, we'll see more lengthening and neutrality in that spine. And also on top of that, then that spine, how the spine is positioned has an effect on breathing and your ability to produce force. So we went down a bit of a biomechanical kind of wormhole. I think we're going to kind of leave it there for the sake of this podcast, but we might come revisit that. But simple principle, external rotation more stable, internal rotation less stable. And that applies across most of the body.
So wider bars are better.
Again, we can get to a limit. A limit. Well, this is why. So mountain bike. So let's go into that. Like, if you go into a mountain bike position with your wrists at a perpendicular position to your handshake position, you are effectively internally rotating your shoulder. So you're already in a less stable position. So you need a wider position to create even more stability. And if you come into a handshake position, which is basically your road bike position, you can ride a narrow bar because you're externally rotating your shoulders, and actually you can control that position more effectively with a narrow position. So it does make sense within those contexts. And then there's everything in between, you know. So again, when it comes to handlebars, again, you've got to figure out what's right for you and your anatomy. You know, do you have wide shoulders? Do you have narrow shoulders? Where do you like to carry them? Where do you like to carry your wrists? What is your discipline? So are you riding a mountain bike? Are you riding a gravel bike? Are you riding a road bike? And experiment within those kind of boundaries, you know.
I think it's all about being aware of what the consequences are of a decision, right? So, like I say, the narrower you go, if you go to a point where you're starting to not be able to produce enough force to make the bike go at the speed that you want or need it to, then you might have hit the limit.
Yeah, but you know, if your priority is to get the most aerodynamic gain, and maybe that trumps like force production, then and you don't need to, and you're strong enough to handle the bike, then maybe that's okay.
Can aerodynamics ever trump power production?
Never. Ever.
I feel
aerodynamics trump force production.
I feel like these are not equal
At our level,
or at anyone's level. I mean, if you because
but especially
of
at our level of weekend hobbyist, which is how I would describe myself.
I feel like a lot of these things happen. A lot of these trends and fashions happen because somebody sees a pro doing it, and then they want to emulate them. And we've said before, don't emulate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Be inspired, but don't emulate. Or because pros are elite athletes, they are outliers.
Yeah,
they're not. It's not common. They're not an average. They're not in the middle of the bell curve. They're outliers. So, what tends to happen is people will copy that. But if you also look at the pros, and if you actually watch professional cycling and don't just watch a few clips on Instagram and then start garbling about it. The state of, even in a TT, like in a time trial, the state of pros, the amount of force they put through those pedals, the aero side of things is very minimal compared to how much power they're producing.
Yeah, but also you can see the compromise on stability as well.
Yeah, of course. But they're practiced in that. That's the thing. They're training hours and hours and hours a day. Well, the good ones are training on their TT bikes for hours and hours and hours a day for months and months and months before a big event.
Yeah. Well, you can definitely see the ones that do practice on their TT bikes and those who don't.
Well, the Olympic time trial.
Yeah.
The people who stayed upright won the medals, didn't they? But I think the point is, it's know what you're potentially compromising in order to make the gains that you think you might be getting. That's the thing.
But also comfort.
No one wants comfort, mate.
But then they complain about not having it.
Yeah, but that's, down the line. I'll cross that bridge.
Worry about that when you're in your 50s.
Cross that bridge when we get there. Yeah, exactly. But I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's knowing what the compromise is, and is the potential gain going to be worth it?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about a few the other features as well. We talked about width and internal rotation.
So reach, that's the next one, because that gets overlooked a lot.
So handlebars have reach, people.
Yeah, we're talking drop bars here.
Yeah, drop bars. Well,
mountain bike bars.
Mountain bike bars
as well,
also have reach, or it's called sweep. So it's usually called back sweep. So if your mountain bike handlebars, they're not completely horizontal or like straight as a girder, and there's always a little bit of back sweep to them. So it can be normal. I think the classic angle is 9 degrees of back sweep. But you can go 9 degrees, 12 degrees, 16 degrees, 20 degrees. Jones bars will be, I think they're 24, but they're like, all the way back. So
they're designed to be, you're pedaling sat down and you never get out of the saddle.
Yeah, it's interesting. So
well, you've got Jones bars on your big bro, haven't you?
I love them. They're great.
So this is the thing, we have the same bike with completely different handlebars. So I've got the most traditional flat bars that you could imagine.
You've got proper XC cross-country
Thompson
bars.
downhill, mate.
Are they downhill?
They're downhill. Yeah, Luca gave me them.
Well, it says downhill on them, but they're downhill from like 1993.
Yeah, exactly. But it's basically a classic kind of like 5 mil rise, 9 degree sweep.
Yeah.
Like it's as traditional and boring as you could imagine. And yet you ride the same bike with a Jones bar. If you don't know what a Jones bar is, Google it.
Yeah.
But this is like the most amount of sweep that you will see.
And it's almost, I'd like to think of it a bit like a drop handlebar bar that's been flattened.
Yeah.
It's been squashed,
So a flat
and
bar.
and the drops are kind of flared outwards.
But it's a touring bar, right? It's got the extra real estate on it for hanging stuff and putting bits on, and super sweep, so that you can be sat down. You're almost like it's like you're riding a Dutch bike, right?
Yeah, nice. I think originally it was designed as a mountain bike bar. Yeah. So a lot of people used to ride it off-road. Like there was a whole Jones bike, which people used to ride off-road. And the idea, again, was back to external rotation. So the bigger sweep would create more external rotation in your shoulders and create a little bit more stability when riding more in a kind of straight line. It became a bit unwieldy to handle in kind of more extreme kind of off-road positions because you didn't quite have enough width to really control that kind of front wheel. But yeah, for cruising around town and doing my daily errands and all the rest of just like town riding, brilliant. It's great. Sits me nice, upright, gets my shoulders in a good position. Yeah, great. Love them.
So back to reach. We digressed a little bit. Drop bar reach. Why is it important?
Well, this completely changes kind of where your shifter hoods are positioned relative to your feet. Yeah. So we often think about changing your reach via shortening the stem. So that's an obvious one. Longer stem puts the shifter hoods or controls further away.
Also puts your tops further away.
Yeah,
right?
puts everything further away. But people forget that, you can also achieve the shifters being further away by increasing the reach of your handlebars. So I think you've got some Bontrager bars on yours?
Yeah.
Like super long reach.
So
it's like 100 mil or something.
Yeah, so in order to reach is a particularly interesting thing for me on my bike because I've got ridiculously long torso and ridiculously long arms. So I want the shifter hoods quite far away from me, but I don't want to run some ridiculous tree trunk of a stem in order to do it. So I've got a 120 mil stem and a 100 mil reach bar to get the shifters where I need them. And that means that the tops are still kind of nice and close if I want to just sit up and chug along for a little bit and look at the scenery. But my shifters are in a good place that if I do want to kind of put my hands up there, then they're not too close and the handling of the bike isn't compromised by running a tree trunk of a stem and a shorter reach bar.
So I think Bontrager probably make round about the longest reach handlebar out there in terms of drop. For drop handlebars.
So Pro do one, which is 105 mil.
Pro Vibe?
Pro Vibe. It's the track one.
That's the one that sweeps
But it
out.
sweeps forward,
which
has been on my radar as well.
Okay.
But other than that, Bontrager is pretty much the longest
Yeah.
the longest reach bar.
Why do you think they do that?
I have
And
no
no
idea.
other manufacturer does. Because you'd think, oh, it would be based on like Trek bike geometry,
Yeah, it doesn't seem to
but
correlate.
it doesn't correlate.
No,
Doesn't seem to.
This is one of the great mysteries of bike fit.
Yeah.
And no bike fitter seems to be able to.
What, Trek
answer.
bars?
Yeah, Trek bars.
why Trek
Literally,
bars
if
so
you go
long?
to any bike fitter's studio, you'll see a pile of Trek
That
handlebars.
have come off bikes and
Yeah.
been replaced with something
Because
short
they're all
reach.
like ridiculously long, like 100mm reach. Just for context,
Yeah.
a normal handlebar is probably around about a 70 to 75mm reach. So that's a good 30mm. Can you imagine like 30mm
Changing
in a
stem
stem?
30mm is
Yeah.
like a huge deal. But the fact is that you can get different bars that give you options. So if you change your stem length, that just moves the tops of your bars and the hoods and the drops and everything away
Further
from you
away,
or close to you. Whereas if you can mix and match a stem and handlebar with different reaches, so that maybe your tops position, where your like your climbing position or whatever, could be a little bit more upright.
Yeah.
But your hoods can still be a little, in a
Yeah.
more aggressive, maybe lighter
Yeah,
longer
yeah.
position.
That was a perfect segue. I was just about to say that one of the best applications for having a long reach bar, so that the top part of the bar, where you can place your hands flat on top, it's still close in, but the shifter hoods are further
Yeah.
away, is to have a good climbing position. Because as you climb up and the bike gets a little bit shorter and you want to sit a little bit more upright, then you want to ride on the tops,
Yeah.
and it's more comfortable. But when you're down in the valley, like after you've descended the mountain, you want to get into your long, kind of more aerodynamic position, then
Yeah.
you can achieve that by having a long reach kind of handlebar. But you need to make sure you know where your shifters want to be, your tops want to be, relative to the rest of your bike fit as well.
And reach can also be useful if you're towards the shorter end of stem length for the size of the bike as well, or how the bike has been designed. So for instance, my bike, if I'm getting more towards like an 80mm stem and I've got 100mm reach bar, I could take 30mm out of the reach of the bar, go to a
put on a
70
longer stem.
and put that back into the stem, thus preserving the handling of the bike.
Yeah.
So reach is quite useful if you're kind of aware of it and you want to create a certain distance of your hands relative to where your feet are, and you might be potentially compromising the handling of the bike if you're doing it with a stem length.
There you go. So, all about reach. And I think this is where integrated cockpits have a lot to answer for.
That is why you fail.
Because I think people don't realise that with an integrated cockpit, there's a lot more to get right all in one package than what is usually given.
Something that you can mix and match so easily between a stem and a bar.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, they're just taking all of that choice away.
Yeah. So at the minimum, you've got to get your stem length, your bar width, your handlebar reach, all correct. And even trying to find out that information from a lot of integrated cockpit setups is really difficult. So if you do go for an integrated cockpit, make sure that bar width, stem length, bar reach are all dialed in.
At the bare minimum.
At the bare minimum. Because we haven't even talked about drop and flare and rise
An angle.
and shape.
Yeah.
So yeah, where do we want to go next? Should we go flare?
Let's go flare, because that seems to be very much de rigueur at the moment, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So our favourite online direct-to-consumer bike brand has come out with some different shaped drops.
Yeah.
So that you can't customise your stem length, but you can customise whether you have a straight drop or a flared drop.
Yeah. So
Make it make sense, people.
Now, I have a theory about this brand. I think their design department is basically also their creche. I think it's just a bunch of 1-year-olds with crayons and sugar paper. And they're just drawing wiggly lines. And the designer's going, oh yeah.
I
do
want that job.
I mean, I would do that job, but I'd have a...
I mean, from a marketing perspective, it's pretty clever, really. So what Canyon have done is designed a cockpit where you can change the width of the handlebar just by taking a couple bolts out and moving the...
Two tiny little bolts.
Two
I'm
tiny
not
little bolts.
Tiny
Two weak
little-
noodly little bolts.
I'm not condoning any of this.
T25s.
That keep-
Not big enough.
Yeah. But the concept is that, you have one handlebar insert, which is the shape of the drop, inserts, and you can move those inserts further apart to create different widths of handlebar. But now they've seen that as being successful, they have
despite some pretty high-profile failures
despite
on live television.
They have created some additional inserts that you can buy for a ridiculous amount of money. Yeah. You can plug in with now a slightly different shape to the drop, but also flare to them.
This is weird.
So why do we want flare?
Aero,
I think that's where we want to go first. Why do we want flare? Why is it a thing?
Because of the fashion of getting the hoods as close as possible, so that hood, that little praying mantis position, which is basically, they're trying to turn road bikes into a TT bike. They're trying to get as close to a TT position as possible, right?
Do you know where flare came from? And where all good innovation comes from?
Funk.
No, it came from mountain bikes, mate.
Oh.
It did. Disc brakes.
Not Larry Graham, though.
But if you go back to the invention of the bicycle, the first, what was it? When was the first Tour de France? 1902, 1901, something like that. Was it 1900? Anyway, whatever. Over 100 years ago. Back when every single bike was custom welded together, right, by a bike maker, maybe by the rider themselves, and the bars, there were no standard bars when cycling first came around. It was you would figure out what you wanted, and you'd get into get your bellows, and you'd
bend them out.
Get your pipe, and you'd bend it into whatever. And there were all sorts of weird flary bars, like original drop bars, were like it was like a flat bar that was just bent down and flared a bit. Like, it's all been done before. It's been done over 100 years ago.
Yeah. This isn't new.
This is not new. Nothing's ever new.
But I think the trend initially was from drop handlebar mountain bikes back in late 90s.
Was it late 90s or was it even
90s.
Late 80s?
No, I think it was early 90s, late 80s.
Yeah, there was a trend for some fully rigid, single-speed 29er drop handlebar mountain bikes. It was pretty neat.
That is time travel.
We're talking about early 90s, 29ers in the early 90s with a standard mountain bike wheel. Or was it even called mountain bike?
It's still 26.
Still ATB.
Yeah, ATB.
Called all-terrain bicycles.
Yeah.
Still 26-inch.
Yeah.
And
then 29ers.
29ers must have looked massive to them.
Yeah. It was well whack. I mean, yeah.
Till they went over some rocks and they were like, actually,
This makes sense.
This is a lot better.
Yeah. But the idea behind the drop handlebars is just to ride in the drops all the time, so your hands are more secure. Because when you're in the hook of the drops, if you hit a bump, then your hands are less likely to fly off the bars, and so on. So that was the experiment anyway.
And it still holds true.
Yeah. And the idea of the flare was to give you more width, so that you could have more stability when you're going over big terrain.
Externally rotate your shoulders.
External rotate. But now that trend has been developed into the aero trend, where when gravel bikes first came out, everyone kind of flared their bars because it was off-road, but you were still riding on the hoods rather than in the drops all the time. So there's a bit of confusion why you would flare your bar in the first place. And then we've gone into the aero trend where, again, we want to try and rotate everything internally. So I think flare has been a bit confused, and there has been a little bit more understanding that's come back into it, because the other consequence of having a flare, i.e. tilting if you look at a bike front on and you look at the drop part of the handlebar, traditionally they'll be vertical, but on a flared bar then those drop parts of the handlebars will be angled outwards from the bike a little bit. So the other consequence of having an angled, flared part of the drop is that it changes the angle of the shifter hood itself, so where it's clamped onto the bar. So early gravel bars all had flared drops, and so the angle of the shifter hoods would also be flared inwards. Now, ergonomically, the shifter hood is not designed to be run at an angle. And so if you put your hand on top of the shifter hood at an angle, you're actually resting on the edge of the shifter hood. And so it's a much less comfortable kind of position. makes sense when you're in the drops, but
and the clamp is you're putting pressure, you're twisting the clamp around the bar, which is not what it's designed for.
Yeah.
It's designed for your weight to go directly behind it, and the pivot point means that, you know.
So mechanically and ergonomically, it doesn't really make sense. And people have cottoned onto that. I think manufacturers have cottoned onto it.
This is where we shout out Profile Design and their design department, where they have more than one brain cell between them, and they're using their brains and not crayons, where they've developed a gravel bar which has a flared drop but a straight clamp.
Yeah, for your shifter.
For your shifters.
So, the shifters. And other, like Zip have also made something similar.
Yeah, but that's SRAM in it.
Yeah, SQ Lab.
Yeah.
They just released one. So people are cottoning onto that. So have a think about whether or not a flare really is working for you. Is that really creating a more stable position for you, or what the consequences are of
one of the things that I think, when it comes to things like drop flare, is doesn't lend itself too much to getting out of the saddle. And I feel like getting out of the saddle and riding out of the saddle, climbing out of the saddle, or just sprinting or doing things like that, or having that option to get out of the saddle, whether it's you're doing it for very short bursts because you want to reposition yourself a little bit and use some different muscle groups, or you're doing something where you want to put in a lot of power. Flared drops don't lend themselves very well to that because your body position is very different. All of a sudden, you've got a twisting motion.
Unless you're Pantani.
Unless you but he didn't.
He didn't have flared bars.
No.
So that internal rotation of your shoulders, because of the flare, puts you in a less stable position. So when the force goes up, all sounds very Star Wars, but when the force goes up, you have to be even stronger to be able to deal with it. And I reckon that's why we're seeing a ton more crashes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a combination.
One of the reasons.
I think there are a combination of a lot of fads that are culminating in poor bike handling.
Yeah, it's a compromise, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like we've always been saying, it's a compromise. You optimise one thing at the expense of another.
There's a lot of arguments going on social media about in the arts, in the music world, in the movie world, where people are. There's two sides. One side is like, wow, they should have done it like this. We want the sequel to this, our favourite movie, to do this and this and this. And then you've got the producers or the artists or the creators or the designers, whatever, suddenly pandering to people's opinions instead of sticking to their education, their technical expertise and knowledge, and actually creating something that works. So we have that in the bike industry as well, where you've got manufacturers who are pandering to fads instead of just using their brains.
So on that subject then, can we go back to like bashing fully integrated cockpit setup?
Absolutely, let's do it.
So we talked about the flare,
the
angle of the drop.
Yeah.
We were moaning about this earlier.
And we've got one in the studio.
We've got one in the
studio,
studio,
that bike.
which is guilty as sin.
I don't understand. This is why I said the design department must be 1-year-olds with crayons, because it's clearly wrong. Like just even looking at it, I can feel what it would like in my mind. How
the worst
how it's not ergonomic.
The worst one is the giant propel.
Oh, darn.
And like the older generation.
The older one, the 2022 one.
Yeah. And so let's talk about the angle of the drop or the shape of the drop as well. Yeah,
so the shape of the drop, the angle that it's situated relative to its clamping point at the stem. That's what we're getting at into. So wonderful design of a two-piece system. You can change it.
Yeah.
So why would you want to get rid of that adjustability?
Well, I think we need to talk about what you can adjust as well with the
I'm getting ahead of myself.
Two-piece system. So I think, again, one of the things that are overlooked when we use a two-piece stem and bar is that when you install the bar, you can rotate the angle of the bar relative to like the ground and relative to the shifter, and you can install that shifter at different positions on the bar. There's actually markings on the bar to allow you to install the shifter.
And as a general rule of thumb, when you set up a new bike,
put it on the floor.
You put it on the floor. Put it on a flat floor.
Yeah.
If your floor is
don't set your bars in a work stand.
And you want effectively the bottommost part of the drop to be pretty much vertical, parallel. Sorry, not vertical.
Horizontal.
Horizontal. Whatever, guys. Parallel with the ground.
To the floor.
Parallel to the.
Yeah.
But it's just that's a starting point, right? You can have it a little bit tilted out. You can have it a little bit tilted in either direction. It's all about where your hand holds onto the drop, doesn't it? I mean, I remember famously Bardet, Roman Bardet. He used to before all the integrated bars and everything like that. His drops always used to be tilted up,
Slightly
literally
up.
towards him, and looked a bit weird. But he was a world tour, world class bike rider. So
third on the tour.
And he got that, and he's got that option. He had that option and he used it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we want to achieve in the drop bar position is a comfortable wrist position, so you can hold on to the hooks of the drop bar nice and comfortably, but at the same time you want to be able to reach your brakes. So if you have your handlebars installed incorrectly and the bottom half of the angle of the bar angled too far up, that will in turn tilt your wrists a little bit further up, and the more you tilt your wrists up, the harder it is to kind of reach forward and reach your brakes.
And just because somebody's designing it and selling it to the general public doesn't make it right.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember the 3T Ergonova.
I try and forget it, but yeah, I remember it.
I had one of those once. So this was a bar. They're quite a shallow drop, a little bit of flare, quite clever, ergonomic tops, like nice like egg-shaped top, but wherever you put the hoods on the bars, the brake lever was too far away. Yeah. Like wherever you did it, like however you tried it, even with I had the Shimano adjustment, where you could, I had it wound. I always have them wound all the way in on my bikes, and it was still too far away. It was because of the shape of the bar. It's like, how?
It's like one of the biggest things that we get in the
Stanley,
studio all the
why?
time. Yeah, people just don't want to ride in the drops because they're like, oh, I can't reach the brakes. I don't feel confident.
There was a social media post the other day, and somebody was talking about how they cut their drops off because they never use them.
What?
And then there was that panda, like just constant comments of, well, I never use them, I don't use them either, I don't know. I'm like, why have you got a drop bar bike if you can't get in the drop?
But it's a choice, isn't it? You want to have the choice to be able to use the drop.
But you also want, if you will have that option, like no matter what shape of rider you are, if that bike fits you properly, you should be able to ride in the drops if you need to.
Exactly. So you don't want to be restricted by the bike telling you where you can or can't put your hands. It wants to be a choice.
Yeah, it's like buying a car with 5 gears, but you're like, I'm not going to use the 5th gear. I'm just going to go to 4. That's it.
On the motorway, just like,
I mean, it's like, it's there for you to be used, but, is it a conscious choice for you to, ignore that? Or is there another reason for it?
It feels like you've got, a pair of shoes, but you only ever tiptoe.
Yeah.
So why can't you stand flat on your heels? Oh, it's uncomfortable, so I never do that. I just walk around on my toes. Like that. That's how unreasonable it sounds to me when someone's like, I never use the drops.
But I think the point is you want to have that range of adjustment whereby you can put the drops in a position that is usable. And by having an integrated bar that potentially maybe doesn't have the exact shape and angle that you might find comfortable, then you're limiting yourself as to maybe how you can use your bike.
Yeah. And there are a lot of different shapes out there.
And how do you go about finding the right shape for you?
Bike fit.
Yeah, and what do we do in a bike fit?
You try loads of different bars.
You try loads of different bars. So, I don't get an integrated cockpit unless you've tried loads of bars and you know what you want. Or you're just willing to take the risk of having something that doesn't fit you.
For fashion.
But looks really cool on the wall. Tell you what though, what I do like about integrated handlebars is usually the flatter top section.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
You don't like it?
I find that quite uncomfortable. I like an ergonomic, sort of slightly wider egg-shaped top.
Tell us what you think, Kev.
Egg-shaped top.
All right, I'm done.
Is that a smashed egg? Or
a scrambled egg?
No, I know what you mean though. It's having a slightly more ergonomic shape can be quite nice when you're riding in the tops. So one of the gripes I have with my handlebar is that it is just a round tube and it's not very comfortable when you're riding on the tops. So that's the
But
one.
there are loads of things you can do about that.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
pad it out.
Pad it out a bit.
Fatter bar, like
yeah,
double wrap your bar tape, or just
exactly.
put some inserts on the underneath. There's loads that you can get. Specialized do some, and loads of other people do them.
But it's
You
something to
can make the
consider
shape. Yeah,
when
definitely.
you're looking at handlebars. Is are you cool with just having a round tube,
Yeah.
or do you want a slightly more?
If you've got bigger
ergonomic,
hands, if
flatter
you've got bigger
shape?
hands,
Yeah,
then
exactly.
they're more ergonomic.
Yeah,
So
it just
it's gonna
creates
help.
a larger surface area.
Because
for
a
to
lot of the time when you're
spread your hands.
climbing or you're just
Yeah.
like, you're cruising, you're just resting your hand. You're not grabbing hold
Yeah.
of them. You're just resting your hands on top. So if you've got something that's quite small, it's like sticking into your palm, like, and the added weight, when you put weight on the bars,
Yeah.
it doesn't feel very comfortable.
Yeah.
And then there's the Ribble aero bike with the bars where you wouldn't ever want to touch the tops. It'd be like holding onto knives.
They've got sharp edges. It's square.
I mean, just, I don't know where.
I mean, if you're riding on the tops on that bike, you're on the wrong bike.
You're doing it wrong.
If you're riding that bike, you're pretty much on the wrong bike. Why are they so 10 years behind everyone else? Anyway, go on, Karen.
Because it's from the north.
I know.
Can we normalise riser bars?
Riser bars.
Drop riser bars.
Drop riser bars.
I think this is the best thing since sliced bread.
Ooh. Not mountain bike riser
No,
bars.
no.
See, like mountain bikes got everything right. They've had riser bars for ages. They've had disc brakes for ages. They have had hydraulic brakes for ages.
This is where it
they
comes
have wide
down to
range of
fads,
gears for
trends,
ages.
fashions, and
Wide
it's all
tyres.
about
Wide tyres,
know,
tubeless.
So riser bars on mountain bikes are cool. They've got a cool factor. The bigger the rise, the better. When it gets to such a massive rise that you have to put a cross brace, so it's like a BMX bar. All of a sudden, it's like people are like they go crazy for that crap. But in drop bar bikes, the trend is complete. Again, the fashion is different.
Well, our friends at Redshift have bucked the trend, and they have created.
I mean, they've been bucking a lot of trends for quite a while, haven't they?
I got really excited when I saw this, though. It's like a drop bar with a high rise to it and a crossbar.
Yeah, as a
on it.
cross brace. Yeah.
Ain't cheap though, is it?
Nothing Redshift make
No,
is
that's
cheap.
true.
But I think
But that's
like,
reassuring, actually.
it's reassuringly
Did it?
expensive. What's that from?
Stella.
Stella. That's
Which
it.
is ironic. That's completely the wrong
That was that
strapline.
tagline,
That was
wasn't
like
it?
a tagline. They went into an ad.
Yeah.
So yeah, reassuringly expensive Redshift bars, but I want to normalise drop bars with a rise to it because they can unlock a lot of different positions that riders might not have been able to get into had they not had them.
All right, interesting point. But are they putting a band-aid on something? Should it be the bike
Not
manufacturers?
necessarily.
Should the bike manufacturers not make taller stack, shorter reach
Well, they
bikes?
They do.
They do.
They do.
And
Because
they're
people
still
don't
not-
buy them.
They're still not tall and short enough.
But
So okay.
I think that they are a band-aid solution because if you were on the right size bike, you wouldn't need it. But it's still a solution that will allow you to ride a certain bike and you don't have the option or any other option to create a good position out of it. Doesn't mean you shouldn't go for it.
I don't know. I think Band-Aid's strong.
So
I'm very much pro riser
Matt's
bar.
pro versatility,
Yeah.
right? Which is something that in flat bar bikes, mountain bikes, things like that, you've always had because there's been so many different risers, so many spaces under the stem is a thing in mountain biking. You don't slam your stem on a mountain bike. It's not the done thing. You don't need everyone knows you don't need to do that, right?
Yeah. Well,
'Cause-
as we've talked about in the mountain bike podcast with John Wiles,
yeah,
then mountain bikers prioritize handling.
yeah.
It's
So
all
they
about
should.
how the bike rides.
Yeah, and of course now Waze Camp is, you think that manufacturers should go right.
Yeah. Well, no, I think people should ride the right bike for them, and then they'll get a good fit. And
What if
a
the
good
right
handling
bike for them is a flat bar bike, not a drop bar bike, but they want a drop bar bike because they're big fans of the Tour de France, and they watch Van der Poel, Wout van Aert, whatever other,
There's always a
Mark
way.
Cavendish,
There's
whoever
always a
you-
way. There's always a way.
But if you think about versatility, you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Right? This is why I like riser bars.
So effectively you're a Volvo, and you are training wheels on a Ferrari.
I prefer
Sorry, carry on.
Subaru Legacy Outback. Thank
As
you.
we all know. Without
connoisseurs
without Volvo,
estate
there
car.
would never be a Subaru Legacy Outback.
That's true.
Can we agree on that?
All right.
The AWD.
But the whole
I'm
point,
more Fiat Punto, mate.
What, with a subwoofer in the back of it?
Bass tube.
Doing donuts in Asda car park on a Friday night. But the whole point of a riser bar is it gives you versatility.
Yeah.
So you can have more options with your position with a riser bar potentially, rather than be at one end. So, you know, if you're on a traditional kind of like flat drop bar, that's a contradiction in terms, but a drop bar with a flat top with no rise, and you've got 40 mils of spacer stack, you get a bar with a rise that has 15 mil, you can drop the spacers 15 mil, be in the same position, and you've got more adjustability.
Yeah.
So I think we need to normalise this. And what's really cool is Orbea have started doing this on some of their bikes, is you can spec either a flat top or a riser bar from the factory.
The Brompton
as standard.
model.
Yeah, the Brompton model.
Brompton have always done
And I
the,
think
you know,
that's
M bar and
wicked,
H bar. Yeah.
because then it might allow people to get onto a bike that they may not be, I'm going to say, capable of riding just yet, but it gives them an opportunity to train into that position and train into that bike, rather than having to buy a whole new bike 18 months down the line if their body changes. So I'm very much pro versatility, and I think riser bars should be more of a thing, and I think we should stop being snobs and just deal in logic
Stop
and reason.
gatekeeping.
Stop gatekeeping. Deal in logic and reason, and put our egos to one side and just be smart about it.
Good luck getting through my ego. No, I got a genuine solution. Genuine solution to that
Your
issue.
ego's like the Maginot Line.
The what? The genuine answer to that is you find a pro willing to ride a riser bar in a major Grand Tour, and boom, you are selling like hotcakes.
Here's the thing. Riser bars are more aero. Tell me I'm
Technically,
wrong.
you think, well,
Tell me I'm wrong.
You're not wrong. I mean, I won't say you're wrong. No, I mean, aero doesn't really factor
On
into
that
much,
bombshell,
I
think we're going to wrap up this
wrap it
episode.
up.
Tell me I'm wrong.
Let's wrap it up. That's a bar tape pun. If anyone.
So I think the takeaway message is that there are many, many different aspects to your drop handlebar, which you should be considering to get both a good fit and a good handling bike. So consider reach, drop, width, drop shape, flare, your top, and even a rise in your bar. All those options should be available to you. And if you've got any questions, as always, drop us a line, get in touch. Let us know your thoughts. Who is riding a riser drop bar out there?
Choose stem.
Choose. You're going to put that on a t-shirt.
I want that on a t-shirt.
Choose stem.
Choose stem. Gone are the days where you could get a cool stem because your bars and your stem were separate, so you'd always get a cool stem. Can't do that anymore.
Choose stem.
Choose stem.
I'd say think about choosing how your body functions on the cockpit as well. Are you externally rotated? Are you internally rotated? Are you locked into a position?
Function over fashion.
Indeed.
That's it.
Be aware of those consequences. Alrighty, let's wrap it up, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one. Maybe we'll get onto TT bars, more onto mountain bike
That's going
bars.
to
My
get
goodness,
even more messy, isn't it?
Because we've got some interesting watch shop goodies in the studio at the moment, haven't we? Love to talk about those.
Yeah.
All right, team. See you on the next one. Ta-ra!
Suffering from numb hands, tingling toes, and any other persistent discomforts when you ride? These are all signs that your bike fit could be improved. If you're bike fit curious, get in touch with Way or Matt by emailing info@foundation.fit or finding them on Instagram @FDN_bikefit. Finally, for all your bike servicing needs, custom dream bike or hand-built wheels, go to www.frequencycycleworks.com or find me on Instagram @frequencycycleworks. Until next time, keep on spinning.